Welcome back to Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, and this is the special version we call Big Fish Side Dish. More specifically, it's the one we call the Fretful Laowai Radio Hour with none other than my guest, returning champion, Kevin Geiger. Hey,
Brendan,
Kevin.
how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Awesome to see you.
How Joe Bujen?
Dude, it's great. How Joe Bujen indeed. So we're going to talk about some things, and we typically, for the sake of you, the listener, we sort of get our notes together beforehand because we typally have a lot of things to say, and Kevin and I we're both pretty chatty. You think I'm chatty? Kevin Geiger is a chatty human, but it's usually for good, not evil. So we have a lot to talk about, though. So let's get into it. My framework for this is that, I have a lot of the insights from my recent travels, and being gone for so long and being a lot of places and now being very freshly back, I'm going to weave those in and around your updates is how we're going to do this for the most part. And then kind of think toward the back, we'll turn the tables and you'll ask me more questions. But the one thing, just kind of on the mundane, we'll ease our way in, right? We'll ease our way into the deeper into things. On just a very mundane note, my language skills really suffered. Speaking of how Joe Bojen, it took me a second.
To realize that I was saying long time no see, right?
Well, I mean, that is one that I got, but in terms of like what else I could say, and that's been the trick is not being able to readily have the great, funny little response because of my, my minimal language skills. But you're here, you say the same 5 minutes of patter all the time.
Exactly. You can survive on pretty much.
So that sounds, I mean, I said before, like getting in a car with a driver and the basic chit chat, for a few minutes, I'm telling them I don't speak Chinese well in Chinese, but I'm saying it with a, passable accent.
Right.
And it's not right. And then they're to quote my comedian friend Jesse Appel, who likes to say.
They think you're being overly polite.
Exactly. And I'm like, no, really. You got the limit of it. You got the extent. I'm going to totally sound like I got dropped on my head in an industrial accident after this sentence,
Well, I'm the same way.
And I can't say that in Chinese. So.
I know, exactly. I couldn't do that either. I have like street level survival Chinese.
Yeah, so your Chinese skills? You've been China
10 years.
10 years.
I've been in China. My skills, as you call them, I wouldn't even use that word, are such that I've started to lie about how long I've been in China.
Because your Chinese isn't good enough to justify.
A couple years.
But I spent a lot of time away.
Yeah, exactly. And I realized you don't need to know so much. How gets you, basically affirmative gets you through 90% of most situations.
Yes/good, depending on context.
Booyah also, I don't want it. Can help you out in certain cases. I've always said that I know, I'm like a dog. I know my name, a few simple commands, right? And that gets you through, get a taxi, get a beer.
Right.
But I had an interesting situation where I was on a field trip with my daughter, Claire. Mm-hmm. And this was for her kindergarten, the first time I ever went on a field trip by myself, accompanied by the other children and their parents, with my daughter. And it was really quite special. It was my most stress-free day in, I can't remember when.
It sounded really nice. You're having a park setting and doing activities that you can play along with, where the language isn't really a big deal breaker because you're doing campy sort of outdoor activities.
Yep. So you're kind of just looking and seeing what people are doing and following along. We were north of Beijing, Miyun, that area, where it was more developed than I thought. I initially thought we were going to be like out in the wilderness, but it was wilderness-ish. Right, and there were
wilderness adjacent.
Yes, wilderness adjacent. Exactly, that's exactly what it was.
I lived in Beverly Hills adjacent, which is an actual place with a zip code.
Yes,
for like
it was like
minutes.
That, except without the Beverly Hills part. Right. But there was one point where one of the teachers was up there. I was the only Laowai there. Everybody else was native, Chinese local folks. And rattling off a series of instructions through a bullhorn about what we were going to do after we pitched our tents and blah, 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 blah. And when I hear people speaking Chinese, it's like I'm listening to somebody speak through a bad phone. I get a few words here and there, some fuzziness.
I can relate to that.
But I'm like 25% there, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm not really picking this up as well as I need to, most likely. And I'm looking down at Claire. She's almost 4 now. And she's just paying very close attention to what the teacher's saying. And I just had this light bulb moment where I thought, oh my God, she probably understands everything they're saying because she goes to the school. She's grown up here, right?
Right. And she's
bilingual.
I mean, you're here, so it'd be nice. I mean, she is a very bright girl, as I've noticed from spending time with your family. Now, she's a very bright girl. So, there's an opportunity here.
Precociously so. And I know she's bilingual, but I didn't know how much until I said, hey, Claire, what are they saying?
And you're thinking maybe I'll get
a little
general
bit, yeah,
gist.
The gist. I got the granularity,
you got
right?
like the schedule.
Oh my gosh! She said, "Daddy, at 11 o'clock we're gonna go potty, and then we have to be back here quickly because we're gonna have lunch, and then after lunch we're gonna do a race, and then after the race we're gonna go look at the animals." And I was just there thinking, I had this thought to myself, "Oh my God, I never need to learn another word of Chinese ever again." And
wow.
This sounds terrible. This sounds like the ugly American. Yeah, but it was that
the hallelujah chorus.
Exactly, like the light, the heavens were
clouds
opening.
Clouds part, the sunbeams
this glow,
raining down.
I felt a twinge of shame, and then
that passed.
That passed very fast and just super relaxed. So for the rest of the day,
like,
Claire, what are we doing now? Oh, we're doing this, that, and the other thing. And now I've got, of course, a second one coming up.
Yeah,
Emma.
You were grooming the backup.
Yeah, grooming the backup. So we've got a backup.
You got a deep bench, man.
Exactly, a deep bench. So, but that's it. We're going to cut the bench there. Just those two. Emma and Claire are plenty for a dad to handle. But it was a great trip, and I was really proud of her, actually, aside from joking about not having to learn anything anymore, that she's learned so much, and that she's really acclimated herself to both cultures, the Chinese culture, also the Western culture, U.S. So that's been really quite remarkable.
That's awesome, and that kind of leads me into thinking about, I mean, there's so much we could talk about. We could do a 5-hour podcast.
We haven't seen each other for 3 months?
Well, longer than that, because I was gone 3.5 months, exactly. And then it was a couple of weeks before that I last saw you, I guess. And we did talk about, there was a minute, actually, I know once, and I think I thought about it twice, we maybe talked about doing this remotely.
Yes.
And then scheduling didn't work out. We actually were fairly committed to that idea. We almost did it. And then the second time, I know it occurred to me, I maybe mentioned it in passing, but it's like, this is an in-person thing.
Right.
And that's what I'll get into podcasting at the end of this, but
and it feels like we've just been sitting here like last week.
Well, it does.
Week,
it's like it's an ongoing conversation, it's an ongoing conversation, and that's part of why, because we're so in sync, and that leads to sort of this point is, culturally we're so in sync, and we're, California guys, Hollywood guys, and we have all these things in common.
Like to eat, like to drink.
Yeah, basically, like makes us unique among humans, but the other things are qualified,
right.
Are signifiers. And so being gone, and again, I'm going to work into my own bit about this because I was thinking on the culture, on the personal level, I'll say this. We didn't even talk about this in the pregame. I'll slip this in real fast and take some liberties yourself as something occurs to you that's germane adjacent. See, we can have this talk because we have the shared vocabulary and the references, and some people
keep hitting that word adjacent.
I know I think this is the adjacent to a focused podcast is what this is. So. Something had been occurring to me, and it's occurred to me a long time ago when I was here before, because you meet some of our friends, and I won't be too specific and sound too judgy about this, because the judgy part is really about, do I like them otherwise? Are they acting good, well, or otherwise? But there is the thing that happens. You mentioned you've been here 10 years, so the local dance moves, but you still maintain. Also, you travel a lot, and also you were fully formed before you got here. And
I was pretty old when I got here.
Well, okay, that's a nice way of. I was trying to throw you a bone
Thanks,
there.
Man.
Yeah. But what I'm getting at is this: is you do meet people in your travels in an expat type of world, and again, we both work very locally, but we also have expat friends. There are people who've just been here too long,
yes,
or where they came. And this is not meant to sound judgy, because I'm still a work in progress, but you meet people who came here, either they came young, and it's fair that they still did their growing up here, and so they're really out of sync with Western culture, although they are Western and they think they're in Western culture. Mentally, they think, oh, I'm still on Facebook, he, so I'm still connected. Yeah. Okay, but then you meet people who, for whatever reason, just kind of didn't get it done before they got here. Like they came here, even if they were more grown up, they hadn't kind of found themselves, to sort of put it generically and nicely. And so the success they have had or have not had in China, they feel like that translates to the outside world, but not realizing you have learned a very specific and weird system, culturally on the personal, social level, as well as the business. And this is getting to the business mostly to talk about. But, I've met a few people over the time I've been here, where I just thought, wow, he's been in China too long, or he came here and just, somebody that had a problem, like kind of wasn't cool or never kissed a girl, and is a grown up and comes to China and lucks into like that not being the case. And then they think they're Hugh Hefner, but really they just have no game at all.
Quick note,
and it's kind of funny, but it's more sad than funny. It's #sad funny.
Exactly. And speaking of sad funny, just a quick note on this. When I had been here only 3 years, I was speaking to an executive vice president of a home entertainment company in the U.S. and pitching a project to them. And at one point, the guy just said, "Kevin," he's like, "get to the point. You're talking in circles. You've been in China too long."
Wow.
And I'm very direct.
Because I've been here 3 years, and I get that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I speak a lot, but I'm pretty direct when I express things. But I had learned here to be more circuitous.
Right,
this was only after 2 or 3 years. I didn't realize I was doing it, but I was speaking so indirectly that he was like, and he had visited China, so he knew. He's like, "I understand. I've been there."
He could help you with. He had a sense of where it came from,
right? But he's like, "Snap out of it." He's like, "Bullet points.
I gotta go.
Points.
I got another meeting, and I love you." Well, and so let's talk about this with you, because you've had my own taste, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later for my own stuff. But I want to talk about your stuff because you got a lot of cool things going on. But you did have a little bit of a sad moment. I from my point of view, a little sad because I know it was something that you're looking forward to, but.
The teaching thing,
the BFA gig. Let's talk about that, and that reflects that's a microcosm of the macrocosm of what's happening with the tightening up.
Yes,
in China. So tell your story.
Yes.
Here.
So when we spoke last, we were talking about how the landscape is changing here. The environment is getting tighter on media, education, etc., and particularly where foreigners are involved. This is something that I didn't see any prejudice against me for. I actually, in the case of this story, I had a wonderful opportunity where the school that I've been associated with for many years came to me after I had been out away from teaching for a couple of years because of the kids, and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come back, and we have this distinguished professor position. It's government funded, etc. The salary was decent, all good." And I went through the vetting process because even though I had been associated with the school and won awards, etc., this was a new thing. And so I passed that, fine, flying colors. That was last fall. This is, I think, before you actually went back on your trip.
Yeah, I remember the conversation at the beginning of this.
And then heard nothing for a couple months, which again is typical.
Totally can't imagine that.
So it was going to be a spring semester course, and so after Chinese New Year,
spring like we're in right now.
Yeah, spring like we're in right now. So after Chinese New Year, it was going to start, and I knew this. So 4 months before Chinese New Year was ending, I was like, "Hey, we should talk about the contract." "Oh yeah, don't worry, coming. Take it easy, everything's fine."
Sure.
3 months before, "Hey, just touching base."
No problem.
Yeah. 2 weeks before the first class week, I was like, we really probably should
time to address, let me see it.
So
what am I agreeing to?
And as usual, there were things in it that were fine, and then things that I was like, "Oh, okay, that we need to talk about that."
Like mark that up. Grab the red pen.
Exactly. Namely, the duration. It was a 3-year contract,
right? And why is that an issue?
And because there were penalties in it for breaking the contract.
Right.
And there was a minimum commitment of 10 months a year here in China. And we talked about
you travel. Yeah, you guys spend a chunk of time because Wen's from Taiwan.
Right.
So you spend a chunk of time in Taiwan, and you spend
we're in mainland China for maybe 70% of the year.
Right. You're mostly here, but you're Taiwan, you're the States.
And that's workable, but the penalties and so forth. And I said, so, hey, let's discuss this. And I gave like 3 different options about things we could compromise on. We could, make it 1 year and just keep the terms exactly as they are. Or if we want to keep it 3 year, if it has to be 3 year, let's adjust the terms.
Sure.
And basically was told, apologetically, there's nothing can be changed. Like, what do you mean nothing can be changed? And this was new for me because in China they say everything is difficult, but nothing is impossible.
Exactly.
Right. There's this old saying.
We're gonna have to update our sayings.
Yes, we have to. some things are impossible.
Some things are new impossible.
It was not something that could be changed because it originated, I guess, from a bureau up above, and you don't send it back with notes. It's just like you just sign it.
Yeah, it's things like that are kind of one direction.
Yes, it was definitely a unilateral kind of thing. And as I think I mentioned before, either on the air or off, my wife and kids have shown some mild signs of pollution-related respiratory things. Nothing serious, but, I thought, okay, maybe we're going to need to get, if it gets worse, we're bailing.
You don't know if 3-year commitment. Yeah, you told me that was off.
A lot can happen.
That was
in
off
3
mic.
months,
That's
man.
what I was kind of prompt you, because you told me off mic. Yeah, it's a lot can happen in 3 months, especially 3 years, because you just don't know.
Exactly.
You just don't know. And I know, and you talked about this on a previous one of these shows. We talked more personally, but you did name check this at one point that that basically, at a certain point you'll leave so the kids can go to school,
or flip the equation in the immediate term.
The plan wasn't right now. The plan was to let them get a real China foundation for now.
Yes,
and you're building a lot of stuff here too.
Yes,
so
exactly. So we had been thinking about, okay, we're spending 70% of our time in mainland China, 30% outside. Let's flip it in the near future so it's 70% outside of mainland China, 30% or 25% inside. Right. Anyway, long story short, although it might be too late for that, I said, okay, well, if we can't compromise on these points, I can't sign it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean you can't sign it? I was like, I can't sign this. It's something, if I breach this, there are these penalties. Oh, those don't really matter. Well, they look like they kind of do.
This whole legal contract where it says it seems like it matters to somebody.
I don't want to be in a situation where I'm reapplying for a visa in the future. And they go, we see here that you've defaulted on a contract, forget it. Especially with the family, right?
Exactly.
So I didn't sign it.
Yeah.
And they said, we need to come and explain yourself. I said, why?
Why?
I didn't sign a contract yet. And this again went to the point about, I thought, my God, if it's this hard to get out of it when I haven't signed it, imagine how difficult it is to get out of it when I have signed it.
Because they're saying, oh, don't worry about it, we'll work with you. It's like, well, you're not working with me now and I haven't even signed the damn thing.
And in fairness to the school, they're my friends, etc.
Sure.
They were very understanding and apologetic about it.
Their hands are kind of tied there.
But they were really kind of shocked that I just said no. And so, we'll...
Well, it was I mean, and this is the private part, but you told me, I mean, it was a good gig. It was the non-negotiable 3 years and 10 months in China part was the sticky part, but the rest of it was all...
It was pretty light. It was like one day a week.
Yeah.
And the compensation for that was fair.
Yeah. So it would have been...
and I love teaching. I love teaching.
Paid to do something you enjoy doing anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so wah.
Well, so getting back to this, as I say, my taste for dealing with the local market parameters has definitely soured, whiskey soured. Hence my development all being offshore. And then, of course, I do the podcast for a lot of reasons. The podcasts, plural, which again is kind of the wrap up for this show a little bit later.
Yes.
But because that's something I can control, which is part of what you have found a lot of satisfaction and happiness in. I think you're waiting on the bags of gold, but that's coming. Well, what else are you working on? What's new with the Pee Wee Frog situation?
2 more children's books I published just within the last month. One is called O is for Ocean, so that's an alphabet book, and the other is called 10, which spoiler alert is about the numbers 1 through 10. So,
okay. I was not stunned in silence. I was drinking water, dear listener.
The first 2 books that I published last year were story-based. These are not story-based. They're, I guess what you might call educational. And really looking at my own children growing up and teaching them about the alphabet, about numbers. I'm really, it's a place, the children's books that I do by myself, blessedly, as you were pointing out. Something that I don't have to worry about wrangling a team or chasing investors or dealing with a government regulation. I can just, in the morning, early in the morning before the kids are up, get down to it, writing, drawing, assembling, and inspired by them, right? And really for them and for other children has been great. And really like a sanity check for me to kind of keep it real, keep it simple, and just keep it to myself. I mean, I disseminate, but the creative and all the wrangling is just me. It's so nice.
Well, and for the sake of people who are tuning in and maybe have not heard your previous stuff, maybe talk just really briefly, actually, what is your background? Because, you can do all this stuff. You write, you are an artist, you're former muckety muck with Disney animation in the States.
That was actually on my business card, muckety muck.
Oh, really?
No,
that'd be funny. You should. But no, I mean, I'm taking the liberty because we're friends. But I mean, you were fairly you had fairly significant jobs at Disney, and you have the background is actually in animation.
Yes, I've trafficked in the arts and animation, my whole life. My undergraduate degree is in painting. I was a fine arts major, painting and sculpture. Was tired of starving after I got out of undergrad, so I went to graduate school for computer animation, 3D computer animation. That led me to my first Disney gig in Burbank, eons ago. And I worked on different animated feature films, big productions. Went from like being a peon to working my way up to a supervisor, coordinating teams and pipelines and all that stuff. Then quitting that to become an independent consultant / producer. That led me to China, where I hacked through the weeds just like you've been doing on my own initiatives here. And then Disney noticed that and said, hey, do you want to do that? What you're doing, but like for us here in China, like combining all that previous stuff you did and synthesizing it. Yeah. And I said, sure. So then that led to the Disney China VP of Development thing, which was a lot of moving pieces, our own team building that, dealing with outsource vendors and different IPs and so on and so forth. And that gets really it's cool, but also exhausting.
Sure. Yeah, that's an executive job, and it's really not the creative thing.
It's a grind.
It's chasing the bottom line versus the art.
You're not doing so much directly yourself anymore. Yeah. So when I left Disney China, dialing back to, Claire was just born at the time, 2015. So that was when I first started working on the children's books.
Okay.
It was just me at home. I didn't want to go and get another job, but I still had the urge to create. So that led me to go back to my roots, just drawing, just thinking about really simple stories. And now I maintain that. I continue. So and I know later in this podcast, I'll talk about something that goes back to the complex.
Yeah, exactly.
But I still like to balance that with the simple.
That's very cool.
And yourself as well. I think you've got like a combination, a cocktail of those going on as well.
I do. And so what I've been working on, and people who, if someone listening to this follows the old social media, then you've seen me go on about this, but I haven't talked about it in a concise fashion. So this is kind of an opportunity to do that, is I guess talk about what I've actually been doing. So any friends or listeners or, people who've seen that stuff and are curious for the details.
And this is over the past 3 months, or even
prior to... So the short version of the long story. You did a great job summarizing your career in a few sentences. I'll see if I can do justice to one project.
I was rattling on before that. So
no, that's great. No, you totally you brought it back around. I see what you did there. It's very nice. So speaking of people who've been in China a long time, was not referring to him, but my friend Larry Sullivan is a writer, and he's had some success as a screenwriter with several options and a sale. Writes in Chinese as well, but he's been back in the States. He's been back in Palo Alto. Over the last 30 years, he's spent a little more than half of that has been in China. Cool. So he's had 7-8 year runs in China.
And he writes in Mandarin, you said.
Right. He does as well, but that's not what we're working on. We're working on totally. Yeah, his first successes were all with things he wrote in Chinese, which is awesome. Kind of mind blowing. He was the first. He was the first He was the first American MFA directing student at Beijing Film Academy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, cool. 15, 16, 17 years ago. Yeah.
Awesome.
A good while ago.
Way before I said.
Way before. Yeah. So basically, the short version of a giant story is that he contacted me last year about, because we stay in touch, and I've been in his development loop on a bunch of things, and a friend of mine, my friend Steve R, actually was sort of like his main actual development. He was doing some freelance stuff as a development guy, developing several different projects. And so I've just seen Larry's writing. I'm not just trying to butter his biscuit because we're in business. I've seen it just really, really become fantastic,
cool.
And so, and of course, we're lucky that, we've read zillions of terrible scripts and some good ones and a handful of great ones. And we've been lucky to do that. He's really, he's in that upper tier of things. And so there's this one project that he had some energy around. Without getting into the details of that, there was a company that we're not going to work with, but there was a company, a real company, you will know who they are when I tell you off mic. But there was a company here that actually wanted to put in money, and they're real. They do things.
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, it was going to be conditioned as like a Chinese co-pro.
Yeah.
And you know how I feel about that these days.
Yeah.
Godspeed if you're developing one, and all the best. I have no interest at all in developing one myself at the moment.
Now, but
we'll get to that. We'll get to that because under the right. Well, you're doing kids animation, children's stuff, animation. That's what works. The kind of stuff I'm doing. Dramatic, the kind of stuff I'm doing, no go.
Well, and just full disclosure, I just recently wrote an article called "Co-Pros Are No Go."
Exactly.
About all the issues that you're probably going to tap.
We'll link that. I read that. We'll link that in the show notes actually, because I did read that, and you know, this is anybody who's just catching us for the first time. Look, the Kevin and Brennan show. This is an ongoing conversation we have about the pros and cons.
Can co-pros work or not?
Yeah. Right. And we did a whole big thing on that on a previous episode.
Yeah, we did.
I remember.
Maybe my first one or second one.
Maybe,
we talked about
first or
that.
second.
Yeah.
But so basically, there was a lot of energy. There was an actual real. It's verbal until you ink it, which is part of why you backed out of the thing that the ink wasn't going to agree with the verbal.
Yes.
But there was a real commitment from a real company that wanted to do this one feature.
Cool.
And that gave enough energy where he's like, look, I mean, they're serious. Will you check it out? And so I had fresh eyes.
It's not vapor.
He had gone off on his own with that one for a while, and I hadn't seen it. And you know, I'd given a ton of notes over the couple of years. Anyway, went back through it. I'm like, okay, I get it. No, this is it's a cool project. I'm really into it. And the script is in a place where it can be taken seriously. So I like. So let's chat. So brought me in to help package it, and the gist of it is that got great casting directors on board because my first order of business was let's see if we can get try to get somebody attached who's got some value to begin financing, right? And the casting directors love the script. We've got great casting directors in New York, Lewis and Fox, Kristen Lewis and Jamie Foxx, not that Jamie Foxx. And they're heavy on Broadway. They actually are producers and investors in a bunch of shows, Spring Awakening, lots of shows that they've done, but they also do a lot of casting, especially for European films. And it was an Italian director friend who made the connection.
Yeah, I got you.
For me, that's so because I wanted people that were strong in Europe and European actors, because this movie is set in the world of fashion and Paris fashion, and young Chinese designer wins an internship with the king of Paris fashion, and trouble ensues. It's Devil Wears Prada,
great
Wheelhouse.
line, by the way.
Thank you. I have to tart it up for the masses, but that's the me and you version, and me and you listening there. So to stay sort of halfway focused or get back into being focused about it is they love the script. They said, look, this is great, but we need something that shows that Larry can direct because he's a new director.
Yeah.
Can you make a short? Yes, we can make a short. We did a short derived from the feature. And I got to give love. My cinematographer, Naeem Sarafi, Persian American, known him 10 years, never worked together. I've seen his work so many times. The guy's a freaking rock star.
Really came through for
Guy's a freaking rock star. And we say this privately. He'll be embarrassed if he hears this for the first time, if he listens to this. But the conversation that Larry and I have with people is, it ain't a question of when, if he'll win an Oscar, it's how many and when's the first one. I mean, this guy is the industry, the camera and post industry knows him and they love him. He's been an American cinematographer. He's the poster boy for the ASC Masterclass. He's the guy in the ASC Masterclass ad in American Cinematographer.
You mean literally?
He's the guy. He's the guy. Yeah, the last 6 months. That's him.
Very cool.
Yeah, he's got all these people believe in him, and justifiably, because he's a total sweetheart of a human. I sound like I should be his agent, but basically, but basically, so when it came to making a short, because we knew we were going to shoot in LA to fake for Paris, so I got him on board. So happy to get him on board, and then he just worked a million miracles. So we had 2 giant relationships come through with Arri that supported us to an unbelievable level. We got to shoot the Arri Alexa 65, which is the digital IMAX. Yes. It's the top. You know this for the sake of people who don't. It's the top cinema camera on planet Earth. It's the top thing. It's the most state of the art thing. and their best of the lenses. They have like 3 sets of lenses that go on it that they sell.
That's incredible.
So that they rent. So we shot the Prime DNA lenses. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then, so it looks like this huge budget feature, and the crew we got was great. We love the cast we got for the short. And then the post, Jay-Z, not that Jay-Z. Again, I keep referencing people. It's not who you think it is. Joaquin Zell, he's in the world of post, people know Jay-Z. He's vice president of eFilm, which is the digital side of Deluxe, which is arguably the premier digital cinema lab in the world.
Well, and just we were mentioning,
and you had a weird reference because the eFilm supported you
like eons ago,
20 years ago,
in
right?
1999, 2000.
Okay, 10 years ago.
When 20 years ago, I guess.
Jesus
almost.
Christ. Yeah, it was 20.
When I was working on my very first
# not a math major
independent animated short film while I was still at Disney in Burbank, and eFilm really came through for us on the master negative.
Yeah,
they did it for I don't know if they'll appreciate me saying this, but they did it for almost cost.
Yeah,
in exchange for a nice promo that we gave them, et cetera, et cetera. Super nice people, and really supportive of independent filmmakers.
Absolutely, and they do, like, they touch a significant percentage of the biggest, most giant feature films internationally.
But still keep a hand out there
they absolutely do. And I can't talk about our deal, but there's no way we should have been able to shoot the 65. There's no way we should have been able to finish at eFilm. And the Naeem this is really his story to tell, but I'll tell it by association as a producer. And essentially, Jay-Z, they wanted to support us. And so instead of like, there's nobody working there who's not an ace, of course. Yeah. I mean, like the lowest level person on the night shift is a total badass, right? But instead of like, we'll throw you a bone and let you work with somebody who's trying to learn the job.
Prop 'em up.
It's like we had a competitive situation where we hired away Walter Volpato, and saying. So we're trying to get him. I mean, he helped develop this whole. I mean, he's a master of what he does. But there's the internal system of where do the files live on the server? What do I have to do? Who do I talk to for that? He's still trying to get up to speed with just the nuts and bolts of working in a new room,
right? With
the mechanics of it. So it's like, how about we get Walter on it and we'll support that. Among Walter's last films that he colored and mastered, Green Book, which is one of our favorite films. But he's Christopher Nolan's colorist. He did Dunkirk. He did Interstellar.
Oh.
He did Star Wars: The Last Jedi. This is, arguably the best guy, again, on the planet. You see a theme here. And he's now a great new friend, and I don't want to embarrass him. I probably won't tell him about this show because I don't want to embarrass him. I'm laying it on.
But you guys are building a deep bench on this.
We have a pretty So for the feature of this, because the whole point is to do the short, and it's a freestanding piece. We're gonna start to get it out to try to get into it. One of the big festivals, but so it stands on its own. But I mean, we're not in the business to make short films,
right?
And the whole way...
It's a means to an end.
It is.
But it's its own thing in and of itself.
It is. And the whole way that we approached the business of it was, Larry, had a chunk of money. It's not a cheap thing to do this, even with all these amazing deals and favors.
Right.
But making a high-end film like this, with a professional crew, like union crew, 35 people, ain't a cheap thing to do, et cetera.
Yeah. The breaks make it possible.
The breaks made it possible, exactly. And then they made it far better than anyone would ever have a right to even hope, much less what you would expect. So the idea is, and then like friends and family. So our executive producer list, there's the one filmmaking side EP, which is our friend Jonathan Garrison. He's on as for the feature, but he's the film side EP. Yes. And then we have like the 13 EPs who, contributed some bread.
And that's a point, I guess, to make for the audience who maybe isn't familiar with the independent filmmaking world. When you see a major motion picture studio release, for executive producers, you may see a couple people, maybe a handful, but when you see a film come out that has like 20 executive producers, you're like, what is up with that? Those
people all wrote a check.
Yes, exactly.
Or else they did something else that's absolutely crucial to making the film.
They brought something to the table to get the film done.
Right. They either brought some if you're adapting a book, it was the book author who gets an EP credit or a co-EP in the case.
Or they got somebody on the cast.
Exactly. Or they're Tom Cruise's barber and somehow he's, blessed your project.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's usually, it's that. They brought something without which you could not do the film.
So the EP is the money or the resources, and then the P, right? The producer is the one who actually knuckles down.
Making it happen. Yeah. And then the line producer is the guy that I hired to actually get the deal on the grip truck and where to the park.
Cracking the whip. And
that's fortunately not my job anymore. I've done it. I've done that job a lot, and
that's hardcore work.
And I'm done with that. Thank you. But so this long story about this kind of, because it sets up the rest of what I have to talk about, and we're going to bounce back to you in just a second on this. Actually, before I continue on too much, but the point of it is that short films, you're investing in the talent. You're supporting the talent, but there's no financial. I mean, there's one short film in 10,000 finds its way to, and that's being generous, finds its way to some kind of return. Yeah. So short film,
you don't make money on short films.
You don't make money on short films. So in this case, our development deal we've done is that basically it's very generous. I won't get into the terms of that here because this travels and there's rules about that depending on where it travels. But essentially, people who put in any bread toward development, it's toward the development budget on the feature film, right, is a certain percentage of the overall budget.
Yes.
And so we did the math to where we offered really generous terms where the people who put in money that help make the short and this other development stuff, they
recoup, right?
It's a piece, and they recoup the by a mold 2x.
As they should, because they're taking the greatest risk.
They are taking a huge risk. So people who invest in the movie don't recoup 2x as a default thing.
Right. They may.
They might. If the thing is real successful, they make a multiple. But it's 10 to 20% preferred return is built-in standard for most equity deals.
And what you're saying is very typical. It's not uncommon. Very typical scenario that you've outlined there.
Exactly. So we made this kind of a deal, and again, Larry had fronted for this. Paris is freaking Paris. It all looks fancy, and it all is fancy, but we did these super low budget trip for he and I and the cinematographers. So Naeem and I hired the French side producers. It's set in fashion, so we made all these connections with all the fashion bigwigs. We have just crazy brand names. Not going to say this on the air, but this is the top publicity firm in fashion. This is the vice president's card. I'm showing
Kevin. The little bit that you were letting kind of get onto a WeChat, and you were very circumspect, of course, as you would be about.
I'm spilling the beans here a bit.
But it was pretty obvious that something very cool was happening, and that you were getting entree into some pretty exclusive settings.
Exactly. It's got to see. Yes, exactly. So without going on, it sounds like a horribly immodest thing for me to go on about it too much. But but the point is that developing this Paris film this is my primary focus, in my life. I mean, I'm here every second that I'm every day.
Did we mention the title yet, by the way?
It's called My Favorite Season.
Yes.
And it's about my seasons of fashion. So my favorite season.
Yeah, it's a great title.
Thank you. And I can take no credit, but I can acknowledge that I think it's a great title. So we have, being back in the States, I'm going to go on for a moment more.
Go ahead.
And then we're going to circle back around
Take your time.
Because we rejoin strongly here in the back end of this, which we're on the back half.
I'm just relaxing on my side of the table here.
You're doing great. For the sake of the listener, wondering if there is a strategy, there's an outline. Right, Kevin? Can vouch. There's an outline. We're actually on target.
Brendan is scrolling.
We're actually on time. I'm scrolling through Evernote. So speaking of insights, speaking of things, being California, and I love it. California, I call that my home. That is my my California is my spirit animal, basically.
Yeah.
I was reminded why I left. And reminded how much I miss it, but how much I'm at home. Yet I don't want to live there.
Complex, but also typical of people who are expats.
Very complex. This is the weird expat thing, and the
Fretful Laowai thing.
The Fretful Laowai. That's why we did this show, is to sort of talk about this stuff. And I mean, I've got my tissues right here. I don't think I'm going to get into the crying towel, and I won't cry. Nobody wants to hear cry. It's bad radio. But also by being in Paris, and God knows they have their problems. We were trying to go places and got rerouted because of those yellow vest jackasses, doing things. But being in the States, the U.S. dumpster fire cliche is sadly appropriate, and you didn't comment on my shirt.
Right. Oh,
Describe this to the listener.
So Brendan is wearing what at first glance I thought was an Apocalypse Now t-shirt.
The famous poster of the Coppola Vietnam
Brando
film,
and as
the
Kurtz,
crazy Brando,
but it's actually an Impeachment Now t-shirt, and it's not Kurtz, it's Trump.
Looking very Kurtzian.
He looks crazier than Kurtz.
Yeah. So I'm wearing my Impeachment Now shirt. Too soon?
I don't know.
So what's next about all this? I mean, this is where I want to segue, because actually we have both also had, so besides like my Paris fashion movie, we have also had some interesting developments related to my favorite tiny little country down in the South Pacific, which would be New Zealand. New Zealand. So what's happening with you? Because this is where we start to. We're going to cross streams of energy here somehow.
Who would have thunk that we had, coincidental news, right?
Related to New Zealand movies,
like New Zealand adjacent news. You see what I did there?
Yeah, I see. It's a callback. We call that a callback in the business.
A callback, yes. I've heard of those.
Yeah,
but we do have New Zealand adjacent news. In our case, it's that we just had announced last week or the week before last at the Beijing International Film Festival, the 2019 edition, that a film of ours named the English translation very directly is Hidden in the Peach Blossom Garden. Mm-hmm. It's an animated feature film, sort of a Romeo and Juliet love story. It's a sci-fi fantasy. It's for mainland China.
Right.
But it's co-pro with New Zealand with our friends at Hoo Hoo Studios in New Zealand. That was announced as the next co-production project they have with mainland China. So Magic Dumpling, the company I helped to co-found, is a local company.
Yeah, it's your Chinese animation company. It's a Chinese
my Chinese partner owns it. We have a contract with Hoo Hoo for this co-production. Trevor Yaxley, who's the CEO of Hoo Hoo.
Yeah, and his card is right here. You see that?
Yeah, that's Trevor's card.
Right there in that stack. Which is easy to see. It's very distinctive coloring.
Just announcing the completion of his first animated feature co-production, I believe first, with China Film Animation, which is a subdivision of China Film Group, called Mosley. So Mosley is a film that's coming out in July. It's a tale of there's a creature who walks on all fours, who discovers something about his sort of a dinosaur-like creature. We'll put a poster up on the blog so that people can see what I'm talking about. I'm doing a terrible job describing it.
Well, it's kind of like if you try to describe Shrek, it sounds horrible, but then that didn't sound horrible. It's like, but when you see Shrek, you're like, oh, but he's a cute ogre.
Very cute, and who goes on a journey of discovery for his destiny, but finds out more than he ever could have imagined, and he's looking for the mysterious uprights, as they're called. So I think you see where it's going in terms of the all fours and the upright. Anyway, this is something that Trevor, to his credit, has spent a while working on and finished. That's coming out this summer. So he was announcing this, and then in the midst of the announcement, at this China Film Animation event, he announced that Peach Blossom Garden will be the next co-production. Yeah, it will not be the next project from CFA. So China Film Animation has another project. It's a Belt and Road related thing. Okay. So there's a lot of that going on, right, with the Belt and Road things that match that initiative. But this will be the next. Hoo Hoo has, I believe, a 5 or 6 picture deal
there. They have a slate deal.
A slate deal. And this will be the next project they put through.
Yeah, which that's public information.
Yeah, it is public. And still in development. So I had many people congratulating me. Where can we see it? It's like, well, I don't know yet.
We got to make it. I love that when you announce a project and people, I love it that they want to see it. Like, when can we see your feature? Hopefully 2020.
So this was great. And the thing about it is that it really was a lesson on many fronts, especially on how to let something go. Like, if you love something, let it go and it will come back to you. Maybe even if you're tired of something, let it go and it will come back to you.
Yeah, talk about it such as you like to. I mean, I did a bit of a monologue. This is a great story. You don't have. I'm not asking.
I'll keep it as succinct as I can.
Hit the high points.
It will be cool succinct adjacent.
It's inspired. Honest. What I'll say before I shut up is that the reason I want you to just share a bit of it is it's inspiring, and to me, it's absolutely an object lesson in not letting go. but also being flexible.
Yes.
And knowing when to let go of certain expectations, but believing in something.
And indeed, and also how, people will look at something and think, oh, how nice this announcement came, like the thing just popped out of the ground, not necessarily realizing that it could be 10 or more years
right.
Of a backstory that's associated with that project. So when I very first came to China in 2007, it was as a consultant on a project with the roughly English translated title of Road to Home.
Okay.
And this was set in the Qinghai Plateau. It was sort of, there was a very famous novel called Wolf Totem.
Right.
That this is not based on, but if you can imagine, actually there is now, I've heard, an animated feature version of Wolf Totem.
Because there was a Jean-Jacques Annaud film.
Yeah, which I saw.
I had a weird connection.
Very adult.
I did the U.S. publicity for Feng Xiaogang.
Oh, really? Cool.
If I'm mangling his name, but the lead actor.
No.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's been a minute.
No worries. The director is Rob Minkoff, who directed Lion King.
Of the animated
version
of
the Disney's Lion King, like the Lion King, which was in the top 10 films worldwide for a long time before everything just got crazy with like $1 billion
before
launches.
Marvel started doing their thing.
But anyhow, I started consulting on this. That's where I met my future wife, my future partner for Magic Dumpling. They were working on this project at the Beijing Film Academy.
2007.
2007. It wasn't a student film. It was they were teaching there. But the school has many student and also professional projects.
Exactly.
The mix, right?
Exactly.
So came in as a consultant. We got on. I moved to China 2008 and attached myself. It sounds like I glommed on, but they said, "Hey, do you want to produce?"
Well, that's the
producer?
business term, of course. And we say it, and then you realize, that sounds a little strange.
Like
it's like you're glomming like a barnacle,
like a face hugger or a barnacle.
Face hugger.
But
face hugger is probably more appropriate. For
a little bit. As a producer, and we worked on developing this for the next year or so. We did a teaser, an animated 3D teaser. We were shopping it around, and we almost had a deal together with the biggest distributor in China, who I won't name, but people can figure out who that is.
Sure.
And it was for roughly 25 million USD, which sounds really small, but here that's pretty big.
Yeah, for an animated project
for a 3D
in the
animated,
States, that's like you're getting me, and for here, that's like,
it's like wow,
representing.
That's a pretty. So we were working with a production company who I also won't name. That was a partner, and they were bridging the American investors and then the China side investors.
In theory.
In theory, yes. Because long story short, what happened is that there was a lot, and this is one of the issues of co-production.
Right, exactly.
Before we could even get to creative differences, we couldn't get the contract signed because on the American side, they're wondering, hey, how come there's 10% of this budget that isn't really clearly delineated in
it's
terms
not
of line items,
it's
right?
like
where is this going? And then the China side was like, what's a completion bond? Why is it 5% of the budget, and why do we need it?
And what do you mean somebody gets to look at? What do you mean that like an insurance agent / attorney gets to verify everything?
Yes, exactly.
And where the money's going.
Right. So long story short,
which was connected to that 10-15% black hole.
Exactly.
And why that's not going to work. And why bonding doesn't work in China, but that's another
another story, but that could be a whole show in itself, right? A very boring one, but still instructional for people.
Well, I tried to, at my old company, we were going to try to do a completion bonding company with Chinese characteristics, and
I love that.
Yeah, that's my phrase for it. Please continue.
For those who don't know, by the way, with Chinese characteristics, that little tail is sort of like the appendix to pretty much everything. Basketball with Chinese characteristics.
When you can't explain it, or it's not quite what you expect.
Right. Gardening with Chinese characteristics.
This is a steak with Chinese characteristics.
Yes. So, anywho.
I'm not sure it's from a cow, but it's just...
Yes,
steak.
That didn't work out. But what did work out as we were shopping things around is that we attracted the attention of Disney, who I had left, when I went from Burbank to here. But then they're like, hey, you guys have a company, you're developing IPs, and we're setting up this initiative. And so I've done a previous show on this, so I won't cover off in detail.
Right.
But basically, that was when we went, Magic Dumpling froze itself. And in a non-compete way, and then Disney hired myself, my partners, to come in, build a team for them here in Beijing.
You came in house as
local
your
content
unit,
team. They bought 2 of our properties: Stone Lion, which went on the air, Tofu Boy, which didn't as a film. That's still like in the vault, and we put 3 more shows of theirs on the air. That went quite well for 3 years. We had a good run there. And then our contracts were done. Like, thank you very much. Claire, my daughter, was being born 2015. So we're like, all right, let's dial back. Right. This is where the first children's books came into play. Me dialing back and just like getting out of the corporate thing. But we still had aspirations to do something big. Right. And this was when the film industry for animated features was starting to boom with Monkey King Hero Returns. Sure. And then also hybrid films, live action animated hybrids like Monster Hunt. Right. So we're like, great, now is the time, right, to like really make a push on a feature. And I remember dusting off the script. We had a full script for what was called Road to Home. And even looking at the coverage, and I mentioned a funny thing, I mentioned Rob Minkoff, the director of Lion King. I had the coverage that Disney did. Disney in Burbank actually did coverage on this project before I worked for them here in China. Okay. Different division, different people. Sure. But the coverage was very good. And it said that this is a potential Chinese Lion King. I mean, this was in quote. Wow, cool. So I looked at the script and I said, there's something here. So I talked to Wen, my now wife and still working partner, and then E, who's the owner of our company, and said, we should get back into this. And they agreed. Yeah. In the process of getting back into it, it evolved from a story about a little girl on the Qinghai Plateau who is in an environment where humans and wolves live in conflict, but she finds a wolf cub and tries to take it back to its home, blah, blah, blah. It evolved from that to this Romeo and Juliet story about there's a girl now, but she's 16 years old. She lives in the future. She's a hacker. I mean, there's AI, VR, MR, all the R's everywhere, right? This dystopian future, very polluted environment, and dreams of escaping into these virtual worlds that she builds for herself, right? Wow. And in the process of doing so, meets this creature. He's actually a very handsome, princely, figure. He's the ginseng prince. So the wolves turned into...
the current version of the art looks great. I think it was probably
those two characters are in. We haven't revealed too much art publicly, but those two characters are front and center in the announcement. We'll probably throw them in the blog here. But during the process of developing it, we had a little girl with these wolves, and I thought, wolves, they're so wolves. Let's do something more creative. So
they don't typically talk.
Yeah, and just not really that interesting. So we changed the wolves to ginseng creatures, like living ginseng creatures, and that evolved into this ginseng prince and these other creatures who I won't mention now. But it aged up when, in the process of pitching it to new potential partners, we got feedback that it was still skewing a bit young, still too Disney, and we were like, too Disney? Really? What do you mean too Disney? To us, it didn't. But we still hadn't shaken all the Disney.
You've got all the DNA in you, so it's hard to separate.
My wife, Wen said, she's like, they're right. Like, really, it is too Disney. And she's like, we left Disney, so why don't we really leave Disney? Right. Like literally and figuratively.
Go hard the other direction here.
So that's where we went in for like the teen love story, going for young adults as the core audience target. And when we repitched it, then people who gave us notes, we came back, they were like, oh my God. But it was like a good oh my God. Sure. Right. Where they looked at it and was like, oh wow, like they were leaning in on the images and like I was like, okay, I could tell even before we opened our mouths when they saw the first image, they were into it. Unfortunately, the legal department was also into it, so we
as they will.
I won't name the company.
Legal's gonna legal.
It's a fairly well known studio here in China. Great studio, great work, and we really got along with the creative team there. And then when we went to paper. We were doing a development deal. Yeah. So it was just like a few million RMB development deal. And then once that was all set, we'd look for the financing for, of course, the rest of the project. Sure. There was one condition that made us kind of go, gah, which was if once we handed in the full development, the Bible, the
spend a year, do all this stuff.
If they were unsatisfied with it, we had to pay them back all the money they gave us.
And what?
And we're like,
we did all the work.
Yeah. Now I'm used to contracts, and I agree with contracts where if you don't deliver, you've got deliverables.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
If you don't provide those, you should give back part or all of whatever. If you've defaulted on your contract. But I remember talking to one of the managers and saying, okay, look, I could be in a situation a year from now where I'm sitting here talking either to you or to somebody who's in your job, right? And not you.
Because maybe you moved up or moved on.
Move up or move on or whatever. Right. Moved out. Who doesn't know me from Adam, doesn't care about this project. Right. Yeah. But they do know that if they just say, I'm not really feeling it, they can get a few million RMB back on their books for the things they do care about. And I said, I don't want to be in that situation. Sure. And unfortunately, they were like, sorry, boilerplate. the legal department just wouldn't move on it. And then they said other people sign it. I'm saying, yeah, sure they do. And they probably have no intention of ever honoring it.
Right.
But, I kind of...
Especially as a foreigner and a family and your
try to honor
nieces
those,
and your company. And we're... we won't beat this old saw because it's been done so well so many times, but contracts are treated differently here, but they are contracts.
Right.
But people's attitude toward contracts is different. And so that alone is why there's a lot of the misconceptions on the outside world and just inability to functionally operate here inside China, because people, if you have your Western understanding of contracts, you're going to have a hard time getting in sync with the local standards of how it's really a starting point. They expect certain changes, but at the end of the day, you signed a thing.
Yes, I can be flexible.
If people want to hold you to it, they can hold you to it.
But I want to be honorable and
sure.
It's often said that contracts in the Western world are a wrapper, right? You've accounted for everything you can possibly account for, and here it's a quote unquote starting point.
Exactly.
And people don't typically even read the contracts they sign. They just sign.
Right.
All right,
it's
let's
more
just do
for
whatever.
signing.
And that's just kind of how it goes.
But for us to operate, we have to operate on the terms that we are comfortable with and what we understand.
Also, as a foreigner, here's a tip: a little bit of meat here in the midst of all this, and then I'll wrap up the story. The things that people do here in China to navigate what we're talking about, where we're signing something, maybe not even reading it, and then we'll just kind of work it out. Foreigners cannot do as well as Chinese can. We don't have the tools. We don't have even if we're China friendly and we've been here for a while, we're not Chinese.
Exactly.
And we just literally cannot do those things.
Exactly.
Even if we wanted to, even if we knew to do them, we can't do them. So that's something that we have to consider.
Sure.
Anyway, so this was actually the low point in our...
really close. Could have been amazing. And
it was one of, we had another situation very similar where we were almost closed, and then we found out that the potential partners were lying to us, that they didn't have any money in the bank. They had forged proof of funding documents, etc. It was like, oh my God.
I went through almost that exact situation because I know the long story from you. Well, my 2013, 2014 project, and ton of time and money wasted, and had to reset everything.
A real gut punch, right?
I went back to teaching. Yeah, I had to go back to teaching, etc. It was like a total life screw over because of these dishonest bastards.
Going back, this is where our partner E was like, okay, we're not shutting down Magic Down thing, but let's just take a break. We were all exhausted. It's just psychologically.
Yeah, you need to
creatively working on it, pitching it. What was it? And so he actually went back into the corporate world. He's the vice chairman of animation department at a company I won't mention, but people would know it. And enjoying himself there. And Wen and I then dove into the, it's a pun intended, the immersive media world with the VR projects that we've been working on. I've mentioned those previously.
Yeah.
And that has been our previous year. 2018 was all about that. So the Peach Blossom Garden project, the Bible, the treatment, just sat in a drawer until ring ring.
It was Road to Home.
Yeah. So this had evolved into, hidden in the Peach Blossom Garden. I got a tap on the shoulder from my friend Trevor Yaxley at Hoo Hoo Studios, who was like, "Hey, Kev,"
and he knew you from early. We won't get into the deal, but he knew you from coming in to see you when you were at Disney.
Yeah, I met him.
He's known you from before.
Yeah, at Disney China, he came in to talk, and we almost worked together on a variety of things, but for different logistical reasons, didn't come together. But we've been circling each other for years, literally, and including after I left. He knew we were developing stuff, and I showed him this. While we were working on it, he was very interested, but then got busy with other things, including Mosley, which he, just finished releasing.
And they did the first official China New Zealand co-pro. They have the distinction of that honor. And we were trying to be that with my film that we got screwed over on.
Yes,
but like a couple years before.
And it's good quality.
We would have been the first, and then they were the first.
Yeah,
so when I got to know Trevor, that was like a thing that we eventually figured out. I was like, oh, well, good for you guys. I'm glad it's somebody I like that got the mantle.
And it took him longer. I mean, he went through a lot. I mean, the China ringer. Yeah,
I'm going to get Trevor on the show. So
yes, you definitely want to. Trevor,
tell the version
you're
you want to tell.
listening. We want to
story.
get you.
Sorry if your ears are burning a little
show.
too much on this.
Yeah,
but
I won't be here. It'll just be you and Brendan. But
there you go. There you go.
I'll be out of the room anyway. He had Mosley done, but that was, he said, hey, this is the first of a slate, which I mentioned earlier. But he told me that's a slate deal, and he said, do you still have that project with the ginseng creatures and stuff? Yeah. And I said, we do. And he said, can you send it and can you have our team take a look, right? So we sent the material in Chinese and in English. And very quickly he was like, this is great. Can we do an MOU and get on towards the and so, we did that. And this ended up then being announced, as I mentioned, ahead of all of this.
Just announced,
at the Beijing Film. So we're in a position now where it's still in development. So we have about a half year. The loose timetable is to get the script really nailed down in like 5 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And then at that point, really see what we're dealing with in terms of the budget, the logistics of production, etc. So, as I mentioned, it will be the, I think, second next film. Hopefully that China Film Animation comes out with, that's not confirmed yet in terms of the order, but it's in play. And it's really gratifying that after everything we've been through, that we're finally. This is just one more step. This is not the end of the road.
Oh yeah,
right?
no. This is, you're trying to get started.
Yes,
this is to actually get started with the making of the thing.
Yes,
but finishing the business to get you start making the actual film.
The takeaway, the ultimate takeaway is that I'm a type A person.
Totally couldn't tell.
I really hold on tight to things. I want to control everything to make sure nothing goes wrong, right?
Doesn't sound like you at all.
China really beat that out of me in like the first few years.
Right.
And then on this project in particular, after like we just had these two gut punches, and then our partner said, I need to I need to go back and do this.
Yeah, it's a little too much.
And I just kind of gave up on it. It's like this thing that I thought I was holding on to so tightly, I just let it go.
Right.
And it's like, all right, whatever. It's worth nothing. Just there it is. That was a nice experience. That's the value of it. But then it just came back to life because I let it go.
Exactly. And it's like the whole thing, if you love something, set it free. It's very
cliche, but
it's very true. It's very true. It's so great that it got to come around.
I've let other things go that haven't come back.
Exactly.
Though, so.
And maybe they won't, or maybe they'll come back like a White Walker. That's Game of Thrones is happening.
Yes. So I'm hoping that in the future,
but that's like 11 and a half, 12 years ago you started this. If you're saying 2007, it's 2019. You might have noticed.
Ian Wen were on it even earlier than that. I think 6, maybe 5. So it's been a while.
So this is 14 years.
So this business not for the faint of heart, and perseverance is key.
Well, there's more in common with this even when I made my notes, because of course we have the conversation and then things become evident. This thematically, I won't get into this in the amount of detail because of the time, and I don't want to turn it into another half hour on this. but the big thing for me, two things to talk about, is that I am also rejoining some New Zealand projects, and actually, the first one is that project. It's the thing that we developed on our own. Got the motivation and the encouragement to do it as a China New Zealand co-pro.
Yeah.
Reworked it, spent a year and a half reworking it, pushing it uphill. Actually, about 2 years pushing that rock uphill total. But I mean, the writer, director Andy Conlon, bless his heart, he did. 18, 19 drafts. On and on and on and on and on. And for us trying to make it where we were happy with it. That wasn't all like just China notes. That was China notes plus us. Okay, here's the notes and here's what satisfies those. And now here's how to make that where we're satisfied with it. And the point is, it became like this. It became a mess, frankly, because of all these stupid notes. And when the whole thing blew up, it sucked in many ways, extraordinary number of ways for me, personally, professionally, and otherwise. That's a long story. But and caused this big life reset, in my case, where I went back to teaching, which, I love to do it.
Yeah.
But I'd had the big going away party already.
Right.
It's like, hi guys.
So you're falling back to that.
You got any classes? Because I need to eat. So as one of my mentors, producer named Barry Berg, says, you can get rich producing, but it's really hard to earn a living.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to prove that part wrong while I'm waiting around to see if the first part's right. He's got a lot of them. He knows what he's talking about. But so I'm rejoining these projects with Andy.
Very cool.
On this that's a horror picture. It was an adventure. We tried to brand it as an adventure picture in China, which is part of why it didn't work. But it's because it is a horror. It's back to being like, are you kidding me? Horror film. Cool. It is great story. I love his writing so much. I don't want to sound like his agent as well, but I easily could be. I could do 20 minutes.
You could be anybody's agent.
Well, I think this guy. I think he's one of the best writers who's not already rich and famous. He is spectacularly talented. And he also he's directed a feature. He's got a background as an actor, like a low budget feature, but he's on a path to really. I don't want to jinx this, but I mean, so I'm talking about the business. But he himself, as a writer, his level of craft, what the result of doing those extra thousands of pages, he is not to be screwed with. He's really modest, but he's
really, in there deep on the material,
really good. I mean, this one. The subsequent project that I was in the conversations on, but I was early development on this other project, and that one's like a much bigger budget project, and that's a straight up adventure. It's dark. He tends toward dark, is the default, but hell of an adventure. And that film is with him and my old partner, and then there's a local New Zealand producer who's on. And both.
New Zealand is such a bucolic place. I know it's not necessarily set. The film's not set in New Zealand.
Of course it is.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Oh yeah. Well,
so you're setting all horror.
Well, see, the thing is, there's a dark. Without me doing a whole show about that, what I've learned in my time back and forth, and spending time there, not as much as I'd like, but spending some time there, and all of my time developing with these guys in learning things, is there is a real dark undercurrent amongst the locals. I mean, once you get out of Auckland or Wellington a few minutes, and the countryside's beautiful, but there's some dark stuff happening in some of those behind the scenes. Some of those, they have hill people. They have like. Okay, they have like some of the scariest bikers in the world. I'm not kidding.
And also, they have more sheep than people. I understand.
They do have more sheep than people, so
which is the scariest statistic for me. That's
a pretty funny statistic. But there is a legit dark undercurrent to stuff, and it's not the prime buy. And New Zealand Tourism Board probably would not let me saying all this, but I'm not a Kiwi, so screw me.
But like the orcs now, the elves, that combination makes a lot of sense because you could see how all of those factors.
Totally, that comes from someplace. They actually, and there were people.
Well, it comes from Tolkien, I guess.
People have written dissertations on what that represents in their society and blah, blah, blah. But
see, the New Zealand Tourism Board was so happy with us 5 minutes ago,
and now they're
like, oh man, it just kind of went.
They'll cut out everything I'm saying. They'll keep all of your story. They'll cut out my story if they point anybody toward it.
Really went sideways.
Well. The reality is that
you're talking about a horror film.
Well, I love it down there. And
have you been there?
Yeah, I've been a few times.
I'm so jealous. I've never been there. Trevor posts these beautiful photos, and I'm like, oh my god!
And that's just a snapshot. No, it is. New Zealand is part. I used to say for the longest time that it was like the third leg on my stool because there's L.A., Beijing, and then New Zealand, and that is where I'm working to develop another. I have a company that's existed as a legal document with Steve and Andy for like 6 years now, 7 years. So New Zealand is where I plan to spend a lot more time in the not so distant future. That's actually part of the plan.
I didn't know any of this about you.
Well, then we'll talk more off the mic because I the right consulting gig could help make that happen sooner than later. So let's see if I can weasel in on. Let's see if I can coattail on your deal somehow because I know Trevor. But so that's my big exciting news is that I'm so excited to work with Larry on our films.
Very
and
cool.
his company International Troublemakers. I'm now part of that.
That's a great title too.
I love the title for that. He's also.
Does that cause you trouble when you talk to people here in China? Because it's like, we don't want to deal with international troublemakers.
Haven't had that conversation. Exactly. Well, that's the thing. Well, he came up with that company. He was still living in China. That's a California corporation. He was still, but he invented that company while he was still living in China. because I thought, and that's pretty appropriate.
Foreign influence would be a great title for a company as well.
He's a like Columbia MFA / surf punk guy, California surf punk guy. So he's this weird mix of interesting things.
Sounds about right for a international troublemaker.
Yeah. He earns the title in a good way.
Cool.
But so
congratulations.
thank you. I'm really happy it's early days. So on both of those New Zealand projects, there's a new budget being done on the short film it's not a short film, on the lower budget film. The horror film is a lower budget film. And then for the bigger picture, the bigger film is like longer tail development. But the film commission's supporting both of these projects. Great. They've been getting, they have things that they've been getting. Like Andy's been,
they're very engaged.
He's been paid to be a writer now for a year and a half, just on the main project. Through different deals. Which,
I've heard many good things about
publicly, but they have all kinds of ways they support people. And so for me, podcasting, to wrap it up, and we're on a podcast, this is the thing I can control, right? And I talked about this ad infinitum about why I do it.
And it's not just a children's book; it's bigger than that.
well, I mean, I think possibly. I mean, I think your books are amazing because I can't draw.
Thank you.
I'm the definition of can't draw a straight line with a ruler. So I look at what you do casually. Well, but still, I like what you do. Your daily doodles crack me up, and sometimes you got some. Sometimes you're taking very, very cheeky daily doodle.
They're not all family friendly.
They're not all family friendly if you really look closely. But Kevin does like a daily doodle where he'll post a thing pretty frequently. I don't think it's every day of the week.
It is every day of the week.
Is it every day of the week?
For the last, since 2012.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I guess I have to. The algorithms, and you got thousands of connections. You don't see everybody's thing all the time. So you have to.
A quick point on this. Joe Grant, who was a story artist at Disney going back to Snow White, he's passed away, but a legend in the industry and a mentor to so many people. I had the blessing to meet this guy when I was working at Disney in Burbank. And he would come in to my office and just show me like a little drawing he had done over breakfast. Always just brilliant, some story idea or some like character idea. Exactly. And I said, "You do one of these every day?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "Before I come in," he said, "This is my money in the bank." He said, "No matter what happens to me today, no matter how crappy things get,
I got this.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I didn't start doing these at that time, but when I began my Disney VP gig here in China, and I was in that situation.
And you're removed from the creative.
Yeah. That was my sanity check at that. And it started. Nice. My wife, Wen, said, "You should do this."
That's great.
And so I give credit to her for saying, "Why don't you do that?" And then I just never stopped.
Well, and then even, I can say, I have, took art history class. I know enough to be able to say they are quote unquote simple line drawings, but your hand is evident.
Oh, thank you.
The hand is very, the skill, the talent and skill of the hand is very
evident. I do have
evident.
a degree, so hopefully that's paying off a little bit.
There you go. So for me, it's the podcasting. And again, this one, people who are new to this one, this specific thing that Kevin and I here do is meant to be free form with, there's an outline.
Free form, but free form informative? Free formative?
Yeah,
free informative?
We're going to coin a new thing.
I don't know, I'm struggling with it.
Free form adjacent.
Free form adjacent, there you go.
There's the way to bring that around.
You got there before I did.
So I decided to reboot Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, and you are the second guest. This show is going up next week. I've got one in the can that I recorded, an interview with a guy, writer Tom McGregor. And let's not. After that, after that show comes out on the next Fretful Laowai, you and I will have to dissect that a little bit and get your take. I really like Tom. I love his writing. He is both very pro-China and also extremely pro-Trump. and so
there are many people in China who admire Trump.
Right. And so
not to go off on that.
Well, right. And because that's the gist of the conversation at that point, because where we came to was that those of us who live here, for any length of time, are probably 90 to 95% in sync about a lot of things internationally because we have this shared experience. And so it's funny when you have the things that you are like polar opposites on.
Most of us are viewed as traitors.
Well, it's unfortunately, which is...
why don't you love your country? Why are you living in China?
I love it so much. I'm loving it from afar. It's I'm in a long-distance relationship.
High five.
I'm in a long-distance... High five. I'm in a long-distance relationship with America. But so that leads... So I wanted to reboot Big Fish, and I just did a little shorty episode about this that was just released yesterday, which is a week and a half before you're hearing this right this second. So I have a shorty episode that I did, episode 105, explaining the new model, so I won't repeat all that now. But basically, my goal for it, I mean, and part of why I'm excited to do this is because it's great to see you, of course, that there's always that. And I want this to be the continual thing that we do. And part of it is that especially the Big Fish 2.0 version of this, I'm going to double back to this bullet point in a second.
Go right.
To those two, and then we'll wrap it up. But the Big Fish 2.0 version of this is, I want to actually, outside of this specific special show that we do, I still want them to be fun and friendly and, friendly and focused. That's the How China Works motto.
3 Fs.
That's the How China Works approach. But more serious, I want to be talking. And again, talking to people like Tom. I mean, again, like Tom a lot. I love I respect the hell out of his work. We have this thing that's actually a giant thing that we are completely opposed on. So that's interesting, right? And I want to have more conversations about real things because we get really real about certain things going on geopolitically.
Every show can't be a chuckle fest. Like
exactly,
this,
and so less chuckle fest. But I'm down with a chuckle fest. And speaking of getting stuff, How China Works, Ying Lee has done a really great job holding up more than her end of it while I've been gone. We did some remote. We coordinated a few that were Skype 3 ways around, but it doesn't work if she's with a person and then I'm dialing in.
The energy is different.
It's weird. We had one where we sort of tried, and it just, frankly, we didn't air it. It didn't air because we both were like,
For everything from podcast to producing, there's a lot to be said for being in the same room.
You got to be in the room, and actually, that's CA's motto. They had it on their. It was at least the old office. It was. The text behind the desk is everyone in the room. Yeah. And that was kind of the organizing thing to start with. And it's very basic, but that is the thing. And the idea is like, are the right people for what we need to talk about? Are the right people in the room? Is everybody ready to go? So Ying really did a heroic job on her own as I've been gone, as I was saying. And the reality is that these definitely work better when they're in person. So fortunately, now that I'm back, we don't have to try to deal with the logistics of Skype stuff. And as you know from following the show, that first year is the crash course in China, quote unquote. And now this new year is doing interviews. And we've had some really great ones, and we've had some that the people are great and maybe technical quality, is tricky because of logistics and this and that. So it's great to be back for that. And we have a lot lined up. She's been really busy doing a lot of speaking, and because you also are, you guys are pals online and stuff. And so she's been super busy speaking a lot of events, and it's leading to opportunities, and she's meeting even more people who are also great guests for the show.
So it dovetails nicely.
It does. So Chris Sunia, this guy Lu Yi, is a entrepreneur that deals in a lot of markets, especially with education-related entrepreneur. And this next week, next week in reality, as I talk to you, it's out. As we're talking right now, you can go to my website, crazyinagoodway.com, where all my podcasts are linked. This one and How China Works and my new show, which we'll talk about for just a second in a moment. But the show that's out right now for How China Works is with Dr. Frank Jürgen Richter. And who he is.
He's big deal.
Pretty big deal. He is a former director of the World Economic Forum, aka Davos. Those meetings. But Horasis is his firm, his consulting venture, which he's the head of, which is a leading consulting firm on economics and monetary policy globally. Yes, like dealing with presidents and heads of state. And that's been his life for like 25 years. Yeah. Previously.
That's a pretty big get.
Pretty big get, yeah. And couldn't have been nicer. I mean, just went so. and you notice this. I mean, sometimes you meet people who are, high end folks, basically, who also sort of have the baggage that can go with that in terms of an attitude or a veneer of some kind. Could not have been. I mean, extraordinarily professional. Could not have been a nicer guy. Great sense of humor. Really cool.
To have a good sense of humor.
I think you'd have to in that job. Actually, I'm sure that you couldn't do that job without having a sense of humor. But it was really, and I'll talk more about this when we do the intro to that show, actually, but which is out as you're listening, so that's confusing, but I haven't done it yet. You see, it's the time warp.
God, this is a weird time travel kind of. I know. Like my head's
it's
about
like,
to
it's like we're in a David Lynch movie all of a sudden, but that's where we're going with how China works. Is we're trying to get bigger and better. I mean, including the guests we've had currently, we're trying to aim for guests that really have this, stature, frankly, in the world, that really are doing things they're really engaged in the debate. It's one thing to be an armchair quarterback. It's something else to actually be on the field.
To be a player.
And we got to take a commercial break because this is sponsored and there's real money being spent.
Right.
And those are the people that we're going for with that show.
Awesome.
And that's where I'm working toward. It's going to take a minute until it's consistently
it's
that.
Evolution.
But with my new show, If I Knew You Better, I created it, and I've talked about this also other places, so if people listen to my things, I don't want to be super redundant, but basically the idea of that show, it's very much, if you like Big Fish in the Animal Kingdom, if you like the interviews that I have typically done, these kind of conversations, there's no reason you shouldn't like that show. That show is very much that format, the Big Fish, the regular Big Fish format, very similar format with some modifications and maturations, but with people, it's a global show. Yeah. It's like a global Big Fish, essentially, right? So it's in the same stream, but I've been using that too as a testing ground to change my style a bit, to evolve my style with Big Fish. And I'm still there. I mean, the interview with Tom is the first one in this new thing. And again, because there's a lot to say, and we want to be polite on the things we disagree on. And that wasn't the point. Wasn't to do a debate podcast because I don't want to listen to
the research quotient probably shoots up. I would imagine on
absolutely. I actually have to do homework, which is tricky. More homework than just like a 3-minute fire on the VPN, 3-minute Google search. I dig a little deeper than that, folks. When I have to. But I know people like Kevin. But so If I Knew You Better, the goal is to have the kind of conversations that you have with people like good friends late night. Maybe if you have a drink or you're somebody well enough to really let your guard down, and you talk about the kind of things that you talk about if you know somebody better. Right. And so that's the name and the focus of that show. Yeah. And so that's going to carry over into the new Big Fish. But again, there's touchy-feely, for lack of another phrase to put it. There's touchy-feely stuff, but less than before. And I'm
a little more buttoned. I don't know if buttoned down is the right term. But,
one of my questions.
You're sitting up straighter in the chair, figuratively speaking. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions that's toward the back half of the standard questions is what's something you've been given credit for that you don't feel you fully earned?
Everything.
And then, of course, most people get it's had some really cool answers so far.
You tapped into my fraud complex.
Everybody's got that. Everybody's got the imposter syndrome thing, and so it provokes reflection on what they want to. Even if they're like, if they say it in a nice way, I sacrificed everything else to earn this. So, but then people remember the things that they got that were the unearned, like the bonuses and the help. It leads into like a place of gratitude or mentorship. It leads interesting places it's the question is just to provoke the conversation.
I'm going to give you a question.
I don't care if I get that question
that
answered.
You can use or not, but this is a question that I started using on prospective drivers here in Beijing back when I had a driver as a Disney.
Wow.
But
speaking of fancy.
Fancy. I didn't. They gave me one. What could I do?
I'm sure. Take it.
But I also use now on any prospective employee or partner. But I ask, when is the last time you were angry and why?
That's a great one.
Yeah, you learn a lot.
Oh, yeah. All right, I think I'm
just put that in your back pocket.
I think I'm gonna make a note.
Interesting, and you also learn about people.
Absolutely,
not judging them, but just finding out what set them off and what how they handle it.
Kevin, when's the last time you were angry?
The last time I was angry was yesterday when somebody almost hit my kid's baby carriage on the street. And I almost lifted the taxi up like the Hulk and threw it across the road.
That would be like thermonuclear rage. Jeez. It was close enough call to
I become super scary when somebody cuts me off. It's like, okay, whatever. When somebody like comes close to like, somebody in my family, I just Hulk out.
I can see you doing that. I can see that being a scary proposition.
Anyway, yeah. So that
well, what's the best question I didn't ask you, or that we didn't talk about today, or did we cover?
I think you finished on a pretty good one by turning that back around on me
there you go. All right.
It's all good, and I think I got pretty much everything out of my system. This is a nice sort of. Hopefully it's of some value to people listening, but a nice cleansing for me to sort of like all the stuff that just was accumulating over the last 3 months that I have friends and family who have been involved with it, but it's nice to talk to somebody who's been away and just chat about it objectively, semi-objectively, or maybe it's subjectively, who knows, but just to chat and have it bounce off of you and learn about your stuff. I mean, really envious of your big trip overseas and getting back to Paris and all that.
I miss it. I miss it. I love Beijing and I love being back, but I also miss. The main thing is that it reminded me of why I have made the sacrifices I made.
Yes.
And it reaffirmed that every day I'm not working toward honoring those sacrifices is a day wasted.
Exactly. And when you talk about people who have been here too long, it's typically people who aren't taking enough advantage of
wheels.
They're bitching as opposed to taking advantage of the opportunities. Right. But China's still in play for me, and it seems like it's still in play for you.
I love China, and I have high hopes for it. I'm down on CoPros generically, but again, you're doing the kind that absolutely the winning track for CoPros is exactly where you're swimming.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
I don't want to jinx you, but that's the right lane to pursue CoPros in. I
hope you're forecasting well on that. We'll see. I'll do my best to make sure that happens, and I know our friends at Hoo and others will, our China film friends will do the same.
Well, Trevor's ears must be burning. Let's you and I go get some lunch, and then we'll message Trevor from the Chouar place.
Cool. I'm buying.
Sweet. Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Cheers.